Welcome to the I Am One podcast, where we chat with Postpartum Support International volunteers to discuss why and how exactly they're supporting the mental health of new families. I'm your host, Danny Giddens. I'm a perinatal mental health certified advocate, a support group leader in my community, and a staff member here at PSI. Hearing one person's story on a podcast changed the trajectory of my life. It was the catalyst to me opening up about my undiagnosed postpartum anxiety, depression, and OCD, processing my own trauma, and realizing that advocacy is my life's work. I'm joined by my co-host, Emily Jankowski-Newton.
It's me. I'm the co-host,
Director of PSI's Climb Out of the Darkness program. We've discovered that there is strength in processing trauma and empowerment in sharing stories.
So that's what we're here to do. Our guests will take us on their journey from pregnancy or adoption through their low on to getting help and finding themselves again. And finally, how they're making a difference today. As I always say, it's the coolest club you didn't want to join, because being a part of PSI means we went through something. And as a result, I've become connected to the coolest, kindest, most fun people that I would have otherwise never had the chance to meet.
One of the most important things that we've learned is that we're not alone. There's something powerful in knowing I am one of many. Whether you're already connected to the perinatal mental health world, looking for ways to support parents and families, or just want to hang out with us in your earbuds, we're so glad you tuned in.
And who knows, maybe we'll hear from you next.
On today's episode, we're sitting down with Samantha Konikoff, a guest that is near and dear to my heart. As mentioned at the beginning of every single I Am One podcast episode, hearing one person share their story changed the trajectory of my life. And so, today we'll hear from that person. Sam is not only a good friend, she's also an incredible change maker whose passion and skills support folks in the perinatal period in her local community, as well as across the country. We'll hear how her lived experience with postpartum anxiety, depression, and OCD influenced her greater purpose in advocating for parents. Also, we'll touch on how Climb Out of the Darkness helped her connect with others, build community, and why supporting parents and new families is so important. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the I Am One podcast are the speaker's own. Tuning into this podcast is not a replacement for therapy or any other form of professional help. Our discussions cover personal stories of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and may feel triggering to some listeners. Your number one priority is to take care of yourself. So if you are in need of help, please reach out to the PSI helpline by calling or texting HELP to 1-800-944-4773 for help in English and in Spanish. At PSI, we want you to know you are not alone, you are not to blame, and with help, you will be well. Okay, let's get on with the podcast. Samantha, Sam, old buddy, old pal, I think that I can speak for both Emily and myself when I say that we are so happy to be sitting here with you today. It is an absolute pleasure. So welcome to the pod, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's just like we're all sitting for coffee.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
it is.
Let's pretend.
Yeah, we can't wait to hear more about the exciting things that you do to support folks in the perinatal period. But real quick, before we get started, I think I have to let our listeners in on a little tasty morsel about you that I think that you'll be, no, don't say uh-oh, it's okay. You can say uh-oh. Say whatever you want. I think that you'd be okay with, me sharing this. And that is that, as mentioned in our podcast intro, years ago, it was a friend that shared about her postpartum journey on a podcast, which made it through the airwaves, through my earbuds, and into my brain. And that was the catalyst for all kinds of amazing things to come that I didn't quite know at the time. So the trajectory of my life was forever changed after hearing Sam's story in a podcast. And that is why the I Am One podcast is so important to me. So number one, thank you, Sam. And number two, world, this is Sam, if you didn't already know her. So anyway, before I succumb to all the highly sensitive feels and also join you in the feelings out of my eyeballs department, Sam, you better jump right in, when you're ready. And please introduce yourself.
So I'm Samantha. I live in Bellingham, Washington, about 7 miles from Danny, if that.
Something like that. Yes.
Something like that. I have a 13-year-old son, Evan, who is almost in high school, and a 10-year-old daughter, Emma. I had undiagnosed, I pretty much diagnosed myself, but after Evan was born, postpartum depression, anxiety, and OCD. And then with my daughter, had some anxiety while I was pregnant. And then it was like Emma was maybe 2, and my mom had found this Time article about someone who had started an organization to help moms that had gone through perinatal mood disorders. And so I looked up this organization that's no longer around, but found out about this thing called the Climb Out of Darkness. And there was actually one in our town, which I was like, what? And so that was 9-ish years ago.
That's huge. I mean, that's incredible.
So I met Amy, and it was like some of her friends. And then the next year she couldn't come, and it was me and like 7 people from my temple that came to support me, like 2 families and their kids.
That.
And then the next year it like exploded. That's the year you came, Danny, and we went from like 10 people to like 50 people. But anyway, that I kind of found through that I found my passion in life. So I started advocating, going to DC, met Emily, but really found a trajectory for my life. And, I know, Emily, you say this really at the beginning of every podcast, but it is the worst initiation I've ever had. But I don't know what I would do without this in my life and without the people that I've met through it as well.
10 out of 10 agree. The only thing I'm going to add to your intro, and I feel like this is important for folks who are listening, is that you two met pre-diagnosis, pre-dealing with PMADs.
So we met through a local technical college that does mommy and me classes, and they start at 0 to 6 months. And
there were some daddies in there.
Well, that was the sibling class when we went into the sibling class.
That's right.
And so Danny and I met, we had friends in common, one specific friend in common. And so there's now a group of 7 of us. We have our own little Facebook group. We still, we used to try to go out like once a month, but now we all have like,
now we all like have
and
jobs and stuff.
Yeah. It was actually in one of those groups before I met Danny that like I heard someone say postpartum depression and kind of put 2 and 2 together. But also there was the support that we got, and like the moms became friends, and our kids have been in and out of friendships with each other. But we had this great support system, which was amazing when I had my second, when I had Emma, because I had all these built-in wonderful friends that were like, let's bring you meals. I can come help.
Yeah, because you were one of the people in the Climb Leader Facebook group that I was like, I'm going to meet that person and be her friend.
Yes, I told Emily I was going to we were at a conference together, and I was like fangirling over Emily because she just has this orb of wonderfulness around her and sunshine, and it just attracts you. And so Emily and I have been friends ever since. We've advocated together in DC. We've gone to PSI conferences. She came to my son's bar mitzvah. I mean,
this is a really different episode because we all know each other and we're friends IRL and online. And we're friends also like transcendent of, but also because of experiences that we've all had. And I cannot overstate that like that's the gift you get after you slodge and just like wade through the shenanigans that is a mental health complication.
It was kind of like what the other Samantha said in her other podcast. Yeah, listen, I'm going to I can drop sprinkles.
Look at you.
But I love how she talked about how they made a group out of the PSI support group, that they kind of started their own thing. But Danny, that made me think of us. Like, here we are. We all met in a mom group, or essentially, but we all kind of had kids the same age, same parenting belief. Like you could wean out who had parenting, the same parenting beliefs and styles as you. And we became this like rock of, even if we don't get together, we're all there for each other. Yes. I've gotten gluten-free Oreos dropped at my door from Danny and other friends when I'm going through a tough time. I have brought popsicles and pizza. Yes. Popsicles and pizza to Danny's house when the people are sick. Like, it's such this beautiful community, but yes, made through things that are not easy, that you wish no one has to go through. So when I was pregnant with Evan, Brooke Shields' book had just kind of come out. And so a friend had given it to me to read. And I was like, oh my gosh. At the end of the book, she talks about things that can make you more susceptible to a perinatal mood disorder. At the time, it probably just said postpartum depression, because that was kind of what we were, the umbrella. Was like
the blanket term.
Right. That was the umbrella. And so I was like, one of it was, past history of anxiety, depression. Well, I was first diagnosed at 19, but I can tell you I had anxiety way before that, but had started meds at 19. And then it said, if your mom has bipolar disorder. Well, my mom was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So I was like, all right, well, I already have two very high probabilities. And my pregnancy wasn't risky, but there was hiccups throughout the pregnancy. So there was a lot of anxiety. I had partial placenta previa, and we just weren't sure until I delivered. It looked like the placenta was out of the way, but it was kind of like we had to come to the understanding that Evan was going to come either C-section or vaginally. And either way, as long as he was healthy, I was going to be okay with that. And I've learned from that all birth is natural. It's something like, that's one of my soapboxes I stand on, because I hurt when someone's like, doesn't feel like they had a real birth because they had a C-section, when it's still naturally coming from your uterus. It's just coming with assistance.
Yes.
Right. So there's assisted births, medicated births, but it's all natural. I am so type A and like need to know what's going to happen, but I was able to recognize that, like, as long as my baby, I gave up all of that when I went into labor, because my labor wasn't how I thought it would be. Like, nothing was how I thought it was going to be. And so I was like, I can't control this. And I actually let go of the control, which I think helped in that moment.
That's amazing.
Right? With both my deliveries.
I white-knuckled. I tried to hold on until control was literally ripped out of my grasp.
My comment when I walked into the hospital into labor and delivery was, my birth plan is an epidural. End of sentence. And the nurse goes, you are way too early. I'm like, that's okay. I'm just letting you know when it comes time. My birth plan has one word on it.
Oh, wait. You have a large, inviting waiting room, and I will be there skimming through the magazines.
Yeah. So anyway, so Evan, labor was fairly typical. But when he was born, when I deliver my children, I start running a fever. And so he had a fever, and they dropped his temperature too quick. And so they had to put him in the nursery and warm him up and give him sugar water because his blood sugar dropped. Asterisk to that is my husband's family has diabetes, like, rampant through it. So like anxiety was already kicking in that something could be wrong. And then he was whisked away shortly after he was born. And I didn't have the attachment that, like, I heard on the baby story on TLC, which was really big 15 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Relatable.
Right? Like, crying and loving and like wanting this baby. And I knew I loved him. There was no question about that. But like, no, I was like, people are lying. They don't love their babies there's no way someone feels this overabundance of love. And he was taken quickly, and Isaac was gone, and I was in the room by myself. And really, I feel like the tears and the anxiety and everything started as he was birthed. Like, I started crying. I remember people coming to visit me at the hospital crying. I was nervous about everything. I had a breast reduction when I was 18. And so here I am 31, not knowing if I can breastfeed, and everyone trying to tell me how, and it hurt and it was scary, but like, I wanted to do it. And I thought that was the choice, but I had grown everything back. So I was huge. And there was one nurse who showed me the one hold I could do, which is the football hold. But that nurse also, Evan was born in the middle of the, like at 6 a.m. So I had been up for well over 24 hours, and she saw me struggling and was like, we're going to wheel him back to the nursery for a few hours. Are you okay with that? Yeah. And her name is Cassie. I wrote her a thank you note a few years ago. I don't know if she hadn't taken Evan out of the room, I don't know how much worse I would have gotten. I really think it's the small little things, because she let me sleep for a few hours before the next feeding.
And the thing is, that moment, she also gave you a tool that you maybe didn't realize that you then, I'm sure, used over and over and over again. Like, I need a break, or I need to sleep, or I need something. And I'm going to like use whatever is at my disposal to help make that happen.
So sent home from the hospital, Evan's fine. I have a picture my mom took of me the day we got home from the hospital that I've posted on whenever I'm telling my story. But I'm holding Evan on my chest. Yes. Yeah. He's holding my thumb, and you see one tear strolling down my face. And my mom saw it as this like beautiful moment between mother and son. I'm freaking the F out. He's home. I'm thinking he can already roll over. So like, wedges were not illegal yet. Baby wedges. I made Isaac, my husband, go to Target, get pack and play and a wedge, because I was determined Evan was already rolling over at 48 hours old. And the anxiety was starting big time. And so I just remember like the constant fear, like if he cried, I hid. Breastfeeding was not working. And I know a lot of people have talked about when they stop breastfeeding, like the anxiety comes up, or like there's demare, right? Where when the milk, when the flow starts, you get agitated.
The letdown. Yeah.
The letdown,
Yes,
thank you.
yeah.
But for me, it was the actual feeding. Something was going on with my hormones, and I would detach from my son.
Emotionally.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, I had to use a nipple shield, so like I never knew if the nipple shield was on right. Was he getting enough? He's crying. Did I feed at all? It looks dry. Did he suck it all? I don't know. Like, and I was so big I couldn't see. And so that's all going on. And then also I'm reading a Jodi Picoult book, which if anyone knows, her books are not uplifting.
Like during the nursing sessions.
No, I read a book called 19 Minutes of hers, which I'm not going to mention what it's about. Yeah. I read that while feeding my son because his eyes were closed. There's no bonding. I'm not there. Like I'm so disassociated.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was told that I love my son and that breastfeeding's best and to go to 6 months, even though it was killing me on the inside, literally. And then I wasn't sleeping because he was in a, pack and play next to me. And I don't know if any of you knew before having babies, they're really loud at night. They don't sleep quietly.
Yeah.
And
like,
they
they make little like squeaky. Yeah. They're like little squeaky toys.
So I didn't sleep because
like
if he was up.
Sometimes it's not even a little squeak. It's like,
no. Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God.
Were you very hyper aware of those noises? And as soon as you heard it, like you weren't even.
I would stay open. I would keep my eyes open and stare at him until he went to sleep, which then I'd have to feed, which then, so putting him in his own room was very helpful for us, even though I'd stare at the baby monitor and hysterical crying all the time, there's so much, I wanted to leave my family. I didn't want to hurt myself, but I was like, Isaac's handling this so much better than I am. If I leave, Isaac and Evan are going to be so much better without me. I just need to get in my car and find a new life and go. I never had ideas of self-harm, but cried like I had lost, like grieving, crying.
Yeah.
My mom finally going, something's not right. You need help. Like this, I was about a month in. So no checkup yet, right? Because I don't have a checkup till 6 weeks.
Not till 6 weeks, yeah.
I don't have a doctor anymore because I've been going to an OB for 10 months. So I don't have a GP to go to. I don't have a therapist or anyone at the time. So what do I do? And so Evan was at a general practitioner we knew them. And I called on a Friday afternoon hysterical. And so they quickly put me on Zoloft, made me their patient. But every appointment I'd go to, the nurse would be like, how are you? And I'd have 2 pages of questions, every checkup for Evan. And she's like, well, you're crying because you're a good mom. You're just concerned. Keep breastfeeding, keep it up till 6 months. And it just kind of agitated. So I went on Zoloft when he was a few months old, weaned him by 4 months. And definitely, once I could bottle feed, and the guilt that went with that was ridiculous.
Oh.
Bottle fed, but like I kept a journal in Google Docs. And it's in black and white how depressed I was and how horrible it was. Like, I'm a failure. I'm selfish for stopping breastfeeding. I'm not giving my son what he needs. This is supposed to be easy and it's not. Why can't I do this? Why am I a failure at being a mother?
That's so interesting that you did that, Sam. It's like you have raw data to look back on.
I had like a journal I wrote in while I was pregnant, but I didn't keep a lot in there. And then when they were born, I just went on a Google Doc or whatever was available and just typed it out every couple of days. And I'm not a big journaler, but I'm so grateful I did this because for both my kids, especially for Evan, to go back to my therapist who I've been seeing since Evan was 1. So I've been with the same therapist for over 12 years. To go back and read that to her, we were both in tears because she helped me get through all these emotions when I was finally. So I should say I got put on Zoloft when Evan was, a month old. I didn't go see a talk therapist, almost a year plus later. Like I got off Zoloft and then I realized my depression was more than just postpartum at that point. Like I'd been off meds for a while before I had Evan. But again, with family history, I wanted a psychiatrist, not just a general practitioner, because I was also worried, am I bipolar? Do I have bipolar disorder? And so I went to a psychiatrist and he would be like, are you seeing a therapist? I'm like, no, I've been seeing a therapist since I was 7. I don't need to talk about this. So I was like shutting it down. Like, no, just give me the meds.
No, I'm putting a lid on that.
Yep. And then I opened that lid and I'm still, doing it. But yeah, it was a lot with Evan. And I didn't know what it was. I just knew I didn't feel right. And I felt guilty also. Like, here my kid and I had to work really hard to get to know one another. But like, I have this vivid memory of holding him rocking him. He was a few months old, so past all this, and we were breathing at the same time. Like our breath
Oh.
had synced, and I knew in that moment we were going to be okay. Like I knew
Oh.
in that moment we were okay. And it's interesting because he and I are so alike, and you two can probably attest to this. So like
Yeah.
emotionally, we are the same person, which is hard because I can
Well,
get
actually, I'm just kidding.
we are the same person. I mean, he's smarter than me in like book smarts,
Yeah.
but emotionally, he is my carbon copy. And so
Yeah.
we can fight like no other, but I also understand him like no other. And
Yeah.
so, but once I realized like that breathing together, I was like, we got this. Like, we're going to get through this. And we're going to be okay.
So at 1 year postpartum, what made you reach out to a therapist?
So a friend we have in common, Danny, had this therapist, and
Right.
so full disclosure, Danny and I have the same therapist. We don't go together.
Shout out to your
We
therapist.
get a discount
Shout out
on
to
a
the
joint session. Just kidding.
I wish.
We don't. We
But
go
another
alone.
friend had her first, and my husband and I were looking to do marriage counseling because a year into parenting and dealing
Yeah.
with this like this depression I wasn't
Truth
really dealing
bomb
with.
right there. Yeah. It's
Right?
hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I come from a family where there's a lot of marriages. I want to work on this marriage, and I was like, not that we're doing bad, but like we need to learn how to communicate now that this little tiny human's in our house.
Yeah, you're like operating in emergency management mode all the time.
Right. So this therapist we went to for couples counseling, and she's like, well, for insurance to cover it, one of you needs to be diagnosed, like have a diagnosis. I'm like, I got a few.
Ooh,
Like,
ooh, pick me.
Pick me. And so
you're welcome. I got this one covered.
Yeah, I'm like, Isaac, sit back, hun. I got you covered. Which one you want? So I stayed. I was like, I probably need to work on some stuff with me.
Yeah.
And then started realizing, and that's, when I think I realized it was postpartum stuff and realizing it was a little more normal. But then talking about something, and my therapist went, that's classic OCD. And I went, it was thoughts. It was my intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
And I had no clue because I'd never told anyone I had these scary thoughts of like there's a certain place in town where it's just where cars make rights without stopping. And I'm always paranoid about it, but I would get hyper focused on getting in an accident there. And who am I going to call and what am I going to do? It got really intense.
Being in a car.
Car. Yeah. And like playgrounds, because little inside scoop, my kids are both redheads. So I'd get very nervous at playgrounds that someone was going to kidnap them to the point of I would not take them. I would let my friends. So like if Danny and they were having a play date at a park, I would tell my friends I couldn't go, but can they take my kids? And I'd feel safe like that.
Where
but
does
not
the
if I was
redhead
there.
thing come in? Tell us more about that.
People like to touch redheads. There's a fascination. And so I just found it as like they're a sore thumb sticking out. They can't blend into the crowd.
It
was very uncomfortable.
Didn't feel safe, or
I didn't like the attention.
Yeah.
I was talking about it last night, and I could feel that anxiety in my body again of like playground scared the living daylights out of me. So yeah, literally, I would let friends take them, and I'd be fine because I knew in my head they were okay. But that was just one of my like OCD fears where I definitely would just constantly think of what could happen.
So you're at this point, you're going to a therapist, you're realizing, oh, it wasn't just anxiety. Oh, it wasn't just depression. Oh, definitely there was OCD in there. Did talk therapy then, meeting with a therapist every so often, did that in addition to medication? Were those things that helped you?
They did. I feel like I was better. I definitely didn't want another kid. I could tell you that. Like, I was so overwhelmed with just everything. Here I was, I had always worked, and now I'm a stay-at-home mom. Like, my whole identity had been taken from me is how I felt. I remember getting in one of the biggest fights of my marriage because Isaac went back to work, and I wouldn't let Evan out of my sight. So if I went to the bathroom, I put him in his car seat, and would take him to the bathroom with me. Like, he never left my sight, except if he was napping in his crib. Even that, to be honest, we would put him in the pack and play in the living room to get used to noises. But if I was awake and he was awake, we were together. If I was home alone. And I got really jealous of Isaac. I'm like, you get to go to the bathroom alone. If you want coffee, you just get to get in the car and walk and get a coffee at work. I have to pack up a kid, make sure the diapers change. Like, I can't just go to Starbucks anymore. I can't just go do anything anymore. I have this human, and like everything I was before my kid was gone. I didn't see any of me. And yet my husband still had this full identity. Like, he was still going to work, could do whatever he wanted. We had just moved up to Bellingham for his job a few years earlier. So I didn't have any friends my age. I didn't have much of anything. So like my entire identity was sucked into this child and I did not know how to handle it.
Not having community. That's a
No.
common thread that
Right?
I think that we've heard.
And I had community in the fact of the Jewish community here is small. And so we had aunties. Like we had 2 temple members whose kids were in high school or college who were like, we're going to come help you out, which was a godsend. One of them, who's still an auntie to my kids, would come over every Tuesday from 3 to 5. And she did not know me very well. And she's like, every Tuesday from 3 to 5, I'm going to come hold Evan. I was like, what? And she's like, go take a nap. She's like, I raised 2 boys. I know it's hard and I want to help you. And she is still, an auntie to this day. Both of the women are.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that. But I didn't have community as in like anyone to talk to.
Peers?
No, not really. My friend was pregnant. Like my best friend was pregnant. Her daughter is 6 months younger. And I didn't know anyone here. So like I had heard about this Mommy and Me class to take. But it was so scary to walk in the door just to like, I'm an extroverted introvert. Like I love people, but meeting new people in a setting where I don't feel comfortable being a mom.
Too people-y.
People going to judge me, right? Like too people-y. That's.
And then the anxiety of like being accepted.
He's crying, right? And he's crying and I've got to get him quiet and I don't breast. Can I make a bottle in? Like,
what are people going to think when I pull a bottle out?
Well, and we live in an area where that has been judged more than others at times. And I don't know, but it was the best thing I ever did because I then met 3 women at that meeting that became friends for life. And then the next time we met some other people and my community grew and I made friends.
So then what led you to the point where we met? Because at this point in your story, you already know Danny because you guys are momming together locally.
So I had Emma. And I had this community around me, but I also had a medical community around me. So I had a therapist and a psychiatrist and a doctor. And so I wasn't on meds through my pregnancy, but I went and saw my psychiatrist every couple months to check in with an understanding of I could go on them at any time. And that is the most important thing I need to worry about is my mental health. So had my daughter, everything, it was like the smoothest pregnancy. And I kept going, are you sure? Like, are you sure?
Because it was so different.
Sure? Right. I had so many ultrasounds of Evan and I was 34. So I was like borderline geriatric.
You're almost.
Almost too old. Not really. I'm rolling my eyes.
I'd like to write a strongly worded letter to whoever came up with that year and that term.
Right.
Because it is unhelpful.
Yes. So had Emma, had meal trains set up, had people taking Evan. Such a different experience. And then also we used money we had gotten as a gift and we said night nurse, but I think now it's a postpartum doula. But one night a week, every Thursday night, she'd come from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. for like a month and a half.
That is incredible.
And it was a saving grace. So she was not responsible for my toddler. That was on us, but he was sleeping at that point in time.
Yeah.
And Emma wasn't so I breastfed Emma for about 4 days, had a panic attack and had a great support system to support me in choosing to switch to formula.
Yes.
And we had it in the house. Yes. We had already prepared ourselves that if this doesn't work.
Go team. Good thinking.
We had, with my therapist, we had a whole signs to look for. Like we had everything. I was so supported. It was so different. But the postpartum doula would do my laundry. So she's like, wash all your laundry. I'm going to fold it. That alone was worth every penny. I would put out like 4 baskets of clothes unfolded and I'd wake up at 6 a.m.
Magic.
And they'd all be magically folded. And she kept a journal of Emma and I could talk to her throughout it because 3 years difference in my kids. It's amazing how quickly you forget. Like, when do you cut down a bottle? When do you do this? When do you do that? So gone through all that. Went right back into therapy, got on meds fairly quickly, knowing I was really scared. I was nervous I was going to have any kind of perinatal mood disorder because, and I had some more knowledge, so I knew I had up to a year. And I remember sitting in my therapist's office going, so when's the shoe going to drop? I don't trust this happiness. Like, I do not trust that I'm this happy. And, oh my God, I've screwed my first kid because I was so unhappy with him and I'm happy with her. Is he going to be jealous? All the anxiety. So Emma was like 1.5 or 2, and I found out, Emily, about the old climb and the old organization. And I was like, oh, I like this. And going to the climb, realizing like I can use my voice, and my kids are old enough now that I feel comfortable using my voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't working in it. My background is nonprofit, and I've realized I've always had a cause. So in high school, it was AIDS awareness in high school and college. And then it went to like children's hospitals stuff. And then it went to postpartum and perinatal mood disorders. And so I've always had a cause that I like passionately believe in. And so once I met these people on Facebook and realized, oh my gosh, so many other people have experienced, oh my God.
There's another community that I'm part of.
And then, can you write a blog post about your breast reduction and breastfeeding and how that affected you? Sure. Oh, can you be on a podcast and talk about your story? Sure. I heard you talk. Can you help at the hospital and get forms to all the new moms? Sure. Oh, can you start a support group? Oh, do you want to be part of a task force? So like realizing as a mom, I had a voice, which took a while to realize and like accept that just going through what I went through gave me a place at the table.
Right.
Yeah. And being willing to talk about it. Right.
Well, right. And realizing it's an expertise. And at a conference many, many, many years ago, there was a speaker, Kelly Bauer, love you, who was talking about momposter syndrome. And I was like, well, I'm just a mom. And she's like, no, you're not. And that has stuck with me. And I say it to so many parents, like, you're not just a mom.
I was in that session and I interrupt hysterics. People all the time too.
Yeah.
Like, stop.
You're just amazing, right? You're just amazing. And that really helped me realize,
to say.
Right. That, I went to Senator Patty Murray's office twice, and one time her office called me back to talk to me. Who am I? I'm a mom in Bellingham, Washington, who had 2 kids, but I have a voice and I'm willing to use it, and I want to use it because my goal in life really is to have no one experience what I experienced and go through it alone.
Doesn't need to be that way.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
And
right.
COVID was horrible, but what it gave us was this virtual availability of support groups and meeting people around the world that can say, me too. You're not alone. And just hearing it once can be the most powerful thing.
That's why I'm
Changed
here.
the trajectory of Danny's life. That's for sure.
Thanks a lot. I'm just kidding. I'm really thankful, actually.
Sorry. Gilly? Sorry.
So that's when you decided to volunteer with Climb Out of the Darkness. Like, you attended an event. That's how you.
And I was like, this is for me. I like when I don't know if it's what it is in me, but like when that fire is lit, watch out, because it just like goes fast. Like it lights fast, and I want to do all the things. So
yes.
If I'm going to be part of it, I'm going to give it my all. And I don't, it's all or nothing. And so I also found people who understood me. Like, there was these Facebook groups that like people understood me, and oh my God, I don't think I've ever felt that understood in my life, and realized, like, putting a name to what was going on, and that again, I wasn't alone, and I really wasn't alone. It wasn't like one person. Now, like 4 people. Like, I remember when my kid was born, 20 people, 50 people. There was not a connection. Oh my God, you too? Breastfeeding didn't work for you either? Oh my gosh.
I remember in one of those groups describing for the first time what I then realized was an intrusive thought. And someone went, that's an intrusive thought. It literally means that like the thought just invites itself into your brain without your consent.
Without an invitation.
And then rummages around in there like,
I think that's where I heard it too.
Like a toddler with
knocking stuff off the counter.
Container of Duplos, just like really wrecks it.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever heard what an intrusive thought was, that I could name it.
Yeah.
And then, because I thought intrusive thoughts meant suicidal thoughts.
No.
I thought they were the same. Right? I just thought they were the same. But I thought intrusive meant suicidal. So I was like, well, I'm not having intrusive thoughts. Yeah. I was. They just were not suicidal thoughts.
Ideations. Yeah.
Ideations. But I think it was there too that I finally realized what was going on in my brain with the OCD, and realizing
like I'm having thought-based, repetitive,
that don't stop
thought pattern, thinking, behavior. Yeah. Me too. Like I didn't realize that was OCD because when it was on a Lifetime movie, it was always portrayed in a very specific way.
Okay, so twinkle fingers, like
that's what we do in support groups.
Support group of like, exactly. That's what I told my therapist was, but I don't touch things. I don't count things. She's like, a lot of OCD is thought process.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I was like, oh. But I think
Sounds
also
good, but
anxiety leads to, again, this, and I'm not a doctor either, but anxiety seems to lead to OCD because your anxiety is constant thinking and thoughts and not being able to turn them off.
They're buddies.
And now let's roll it into, I'm going to obsessively think about this anxiety thought, because that's what went through my head was, what if I do this and I do this and then that happens and that happens, but it was going so fast.
Right. And that's why, Sam, for you and I, who also have ADHD, like this is the piece where it's like the level of overlap and comorbidities with a lot of these things is like, the more I understand, the more I realize what we don't understand about our brains and how they function and how interconnected all of these little parts of who we are.
And the more you want to share about that, so the more people know.
Okay, so tell us about what you do now.
Okay.
To continue this fiery journey of making a difference, this fiery, passionate journey.
Because you do lots of things.
I do a lot of things. I have my hands in a lot of different
With
pots.
PSI, you still are a climb leader, correct?
I am still a climb leader, and I just applied to do peer groups with PSI because I love leading support groups.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
In 2017, nurse practitioner and I started Village Circle, which is our local GPS trained support group that is for expecting and new moms. And we were able to meet in person for 2 years before going virtual, which is kind of sad. We've been virtual longer than we were in person, but it gives me light. And every month when it used to be every week pre-COVID, and then post-COVID, we meet twice a month, but it is the highlight of my week when I do it. I absolutely love being a place for these mothers, expecting mothers, to have a place to say, this is hard, this is great, like get to talk about themselves and not about the baby. Because I think that's so important.
And that was really huge over the pandemic because, as you mentioned, having a community in these like parenting classes that you and I met in, that was huge. Having peers. And so during the pandemic, as we all know, parents didn't have that. There was no let's go meet at the park, and push our kids in the stroller. We need, I need to get outside and get some fresh air. It was like, oh, we're not going anywhere and I don't know anybody. And how am I going to meet people? So this support group has been online. Many support groups, even therapy has had like a huge push to our therapist didn't even offer online sessions. There was something, I remember reading in the intake paperwork saying that like this is in person only, like we're not going to communicate electronically.
Oh, before COVID.
Right. Yes, pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. Pre-pandemic.
Yep.
And so just all that to say that we've come.
Well, a lot of that was insurance. Insurance wouldn't cover telehealth till
Thanks a lot,
COVID.
Insurance.
Yep, because that was a big I remember so the other thing I did was probably about the same time Village Circle started, our support group. I know providers, and I had a friend, Michelle, who had started this therapy called Mobile Mama Therapy, which is amazing. They would go to people's houses if like you couldn't leave your home. She would come give you therapy at your house. Amazing. But I kept going. And this is probably after a DC trip, Emily, that I was like, we need everyone at the table. I don't know who that is, but we need everyone at a table, and we need to talk in our county what we can do to support. So behind the scenes, I didn't know that Michelle was getting together with someone from the Department of Health, and we started this maternal mental health task force. So I am one of the first members, and it was really, one, it's amazing because I would sit at these meetings, but two, I could kind of call out doctors and nurses because I didn't work with them. I was the parent at the table. I was the patient. So I have a vivid memory of a nurse from a place in town making a comment that they follow up with their moms before 6 weeks. And I was like, if you did that, we would not be here. And so I just said, I called her out. And I remember some providers coming up to me after being like, thank you. And I'm like, I have no skin in the game with that. I'm not going to get fired. I'm done having babies, and I don't work with any of you. I'm sitting on a task force, which I was doing for free.
And actually, I was not contacted. No, I was not followed up with. No.
Never.
Right.
So let's start doing that.
So I do that. I do support groups. I do climb. I do the task force, and then I'm also part of a study with PCORI, and I'm the patient representative for the state of Washington on research on telemedicine and telehealth. And then I'm also on the board, finishing up 5 years of my board as secretary at Perinatal Support Washington, which is a kind of a PSI chapter, kind of. I guess,
yeah, it's like the Washington,
kind of.
you know.
Well,
sort
no,
of.
it's a nonprofit, kind of, sort of. But yeah, that's a sprinkling of what I do. I'm sure there's other things. I did some work with University of Colorado Boulder with their ALMA study, which was one-to-one peer work with expectant and new moms who had tested has screened a certain number on the PHQ-9, which is a depression screening, using behavioral activation. And then I also did some work with 2020 Mom for a little bit, helping with their Mom Congress and stuff like that.
2020 Mom, which is now the Policy Center for Maternal Mental Health.
The Policy Center. So I've done a lot of things. I've gone to DC a few times to advocate, and I've presented at PSI conferences twice. How could I forget?
Hello.
I presented on peer work.
Yes.
Oh, 2 years in a row.
You are fancy.
One in Portland and one virtual through COVID. So
cool.
I stay busy, and I help moms. I help in my Jewish community. I help set up meal trains so that when a baby is born, the parents are taken care of a little bit.
I don't understand why food isn't a love language. I think it should be.
It is.
It is.
So I think that's what I do. Did I forget?
You do a lot of things, man. I can't even walk around town with Sam. She knows all the peeps.
I know.
Oh, Emily, whatever.
We need to go somewhere more private. Everybody knows you.
See, it's also what happens when you move around a lot as a kid, and then as an adult, young adult, you move a lot too. You know people in a lot of places.
Also,
and then you do this work. You meet people literally everywhere, which is amazing, because if I know someone who reaches out to me, I could be like, I know someone in Tennessee. I know a bunch of people in Maryland. I know people in California, Alaska.
And if that's what it takes to get people connected to help, then you are nailing it. Here's the other thing. Also, if Sam doesn't know you, she will. Like the cashier at Trader Joe's. Let me tell you my life story. And by the end of the transaction, she's got a Village Circle business card. She knows all about PSWA and PSI. She's covered all the main bullet points.
I don't hear a bad thing I'm not hearing anything negative.
I'm saying you're doing great stuff, my friend.
I used to be embarrassed that I talked a lot. But
it is all good stuff.
It's helped a lot.
Well, you talking, Sam, changes people's lives. So, just throwing that out there.
Yep.
Yeah. Uh-oh. I said something emotional.
We don't do emotional.
Yeah, no, we don't.
I already did emotional. We're good.
I think maybe this might be a great time to hop into the lightning round, molasses round, fourth trimester. Sam? Besides this podcast, because what is your favorite podcast?
Oh my God, that's so hard. I listen to so many because I'm all about all the murder podcasts. I have a lot of them. Hold on.
I'm clearly the only one that doesn't.
I also do not listen to murder podcasts, Danny. You are not the only one.
Fine, there's two people
we are the only ones.
So I do really like The Moth, and that is not a murder podcast, but it is live storytelling. It's through PRX and NPR, and it's so much fun to listen to.
We've heard from two people recently.
I love it.
Is it new? Has it been around for a while?
It's an NPR show that's been on NPR for a long time.
Okay.
And they made a podcast of it, but some episodes are 5 minutes, some are an hour, and they each have a theme. But you get to hear this. It's like, to me, it's almost voyeuristic. Like you get to hear these little snippets of people's lives, but it's
like a documentary, like an audio documentary.
It's like they have 5 minutes and they're not allowed to have notes. And they just tell the story, and it's lovely. I love it.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Okay. I'm going to guess the answer based on the podcast list, but we need to know, do you prefer a book in your hand or a book in your ear?
So lately it's been a book in my ear, but I used to love to read, but my attention, like my ADD, just does not let me sit and read. So it has become audiobooks have been my thing.
Sam, what is your go-to for a quick mental break?
I want to say it's like scrolling my phone, but I feel like that's not the mental break I really need. So now that it's sunny outside, I will say just sitting on my deck for a few minutes with the dogs.
What is your best parenting hack, if you could bestow a little knowledge or a hot tip?
Don't listen Don't listen to what everyone has to say. You know your kid best and trust your gut. Trust yourself. If you want advice, ask for it.
Yes. Yeah, because that's not to say all advice is bad if you're asking for it. But
Right.
if people are just telling you what you should be doing and it doesn't feel right, do what feels right is what you're saying. That's what I'm hearing.
You know yourself.
Well, what is one way that you'll show yourself some radical love today, friend?
Well, this has been my radical love, is getting to hang with like two of my nearest and dearest
radical.
friends.
Oh,
But
we radically love you too.
I
think this morning, my radical love is I just take care of myself. I just relax in the morning. I take an hour I try to take an hour after everyone leaves my house to just sit and drink some coffee and just, if I scroll my phone, I scroll my phone. Like, it's my hour to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And that's really been some radical love for me, is to not feel guilty, to just sit. And if nothing gets done at that moment, the laundry will always be here.
Right.
The dishes will always be here.
Yep. And there's
like Sisyphus.
There's other people
over and over and over again.
There's other people in your house that can help with that too.
Exactly.
Not all on you. Sam,
I'm so impressed with us.
If anybody would like to get a hold of you, is there a best way to get a hold of you? No. Don't call her. She'll call you.
Just email us. We'll flag her down.
We'll connect you through.
Instagram is really probably, and Facebook, but yeah.
Okay. Sam, thank you for joining us on this podcast episode today. This very special podcast episode where we only cried a little bit at the beginning.
Special.
We are so thankful that you were willing to come on here and share your story. And Emily, do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story and changing the trajectory of a lot of people's lives.
You are doing such important work, and we're so thankful for you.
Oh, well, I'm very thankful for the both of you too.
Oh,
and thank you for having me today.
It's been fun.
It's been so fun.
Thanks for tuning in to the I Am One podcast. Check out today's show notes where we'll drop links to all the important things that we mentioned in this episode. Please consider sharing about our show on social media and following and rating our show wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. It only takes a minute of your time and, well, that'll help with our collective mission of bringing resources and local support to folks worldwide. From everyone here at PSI, thanks again for listening.